To get us started tonight, here's a question from Arthur Ranken.
Thank you, PK. My question is to all of the members of the panel. Given the recent federal referendum result and the result of the by-election on Saturday in Dunkley, what would each of the panellists suggest that both Mr Albanese and Mr Dutton now need to do for their respective parties to win the next federal election?
I think the first thing we should acknowledge when we have a referendum or an election is to celebrate it. And the most important thing we do is the concession on the night. And our candidate, Nathan Conroy, gave an amazing concession speech and rightly congratulated Jodie Bellier. She deserves credit, and as do her party. But then we'll analyse the numbers and say, well, what can you read into that? And all of the commentators agree there's a glass half full, glass half empty for both parties. I think for my party, the Liberal Party, we can celebrate the fact that from a year ago with the Aston by-election, where we suffered a 6.3% two-party preferred swing, to a swing that is 3.6, maybe close to 4, you add those together, that's 10% two-party preferred. That is the voters in Victoria telling this government that they feel they are distracted and they're not focused on the cost of living issues that matter to them.
But Labor's primary vote went up.
Well, I think the primary vote's a bit deceptive because on both sides, for our party and the Labor Party, there was a dramatic fall in the Greens political party. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is the way they've sought to divide our community, the Greens political party. But then also One Nation and UAP didn't run candidates. So the primaries are a little bit distorted on both, and that's why the two-party preferred is the more interesting number to look at.
Was it a scare campaign?
It wasn't a scare campaign. In politics, that there will be a positive pitch that the candidates will do, and you will hold the other side to account. And for anyone who was there in Dunkley on the day, there were big, gruesome pictures of Peter Dutton with our candidate, Nathan Conroy. They weren't flattering pictures. There was a scare campaign run about Nathan's time as a mayor, which was dishonest. This happens. But look, the voters in Dunkley and in Australian elections, they can see through that. So they will vote on the issues that matter, and all I heard on the day was cost of living.
OK, Keith, obviously like a pretty positive comment about the campaign that was run, but I've got to be blunt, you didn't win though, and you've held this seat before.
For 23 years.
Yeah, this is not like a seat that's always been Labor.
Not at all.
Yeah, look, you don't come on a show like this for talking points. So let's be blunt. We didn't win the seat, and in order for us to earn the right to be in government, that's one of the seats we should win. So how do we do it? Peter Dutton and the team have done an amazing job of holding the government to account. And with all due respect, Katie, there's a lot of things to hold this government to account on. But when you get closer to an election, that's not enough. You need to tell the people in an electorate in this country that you have the policies, the people, the character and the competence that they will maybe trust you with government. So there's two sides to the equation, and that will come in time, and that policy work has been done right now.
Is the problem you just didn't have enough to offer?
Well, it's hard. By-elections come early in the cycle. There is a time that policy takes time to develop. And that will happen closer to the election, but you don't have it good to go for a by-election.
And today, Michael Sukkar, who is the Liberal Party spokesperson on housing, suggested that perhaps the amount that people can take out of their super might be a larger amount to buy a house. Is that the extent of the housing policies, or do you think there needs to be a more fundamental rewrite?
This is a complex problem, and Australia is not immune. When you go to Canada, the United States, England, young people are, since the GFC through to now, the equity differential between what a house and a unit cost compared to wages has just ballooned, to the point that young people are talking now about giving up on the Australian dream of owning your own home. That is just unacceptable going forward for a nation that values the idea that hard work and taking a risk and effort will lead to a good life, not just a lottery of what family you're born into. And I think that's an ideal that should be bipartisan. We can all work on, and no one solution is going to solve it, but we've got to acknowledge that this is a huge problem facing young Australians.
So that means doing more than just super for housing?
Yes.
So that's not enough?
Well, we've got to do a lot more. If it was just
negative gearing, all of those policies, should they all be on the table?
Well, they're all the ones that you would look at, but you've got to look at everything.
But some of your colleagues don't want to look at them.
Yeah, but we've got to look at them all together, because it's not just the federal government, it's also the planning issues and supply from a state government and also local government. We've all got to work together to solve this problem.
And you think nothing should be off the table?
No, nothing should be off the table.
Katie will bring in Fiona Goody.
Good afternoon. My question is for Minister Keith Wolahan regarding the explosive spy scandal last week. Isn't this a recent example of how the rule of law, which no one, not even a Minister of Parliament, should be above, has diminished public trust in the very bodies that we trust to govern and keep us safe, both home and abroad? Where is the accountability?
Thank you. I was extremely disturbed to hear that. I used to be in the army and know that the building that we work in, the Parliament, is deliberately designed so that you look down the road and you're reminded of the sacrifice of Australians who've come before us. And there's over 100,000 names on that war memorial. They gave up everything for the national interest. And right now, we're trying to recruit young Australians to join the Defence Force and asking them to potentially give up everything for the national interest. To think that someone in the building that we serve put their own interests ahead of the national interest is disgraceful. It's just disgraceful. And I understand why people want to know who that is and to hold them to account. The difficulty we have is that we have to give some trust to our agencies, because we cannot reveal the tactics, techniques and procedures that our agencies use. And it's possible that there is a risk that they will be revealed if the person's name is read out in parliamentary privilege. If it's read outside of the building, there's a risk of court cases that would bring all sorts of problems forward.
Keith Wolahan, that is a different line to your leader, Peter Dutton, and your senior colleagues.
In what way?
Well, they're saying the name should be revealed.
Oh, well, there's a diversity of views. This isn't easy, and Joe Hockey has said that the name should be revealed. We're all wrestling with this.
But you don't agree that it has to be revealed?
At this stage, no. But I think the Director-General has opened this conversation. I think he's drip-fed information since. I think that's an acknowledgement that that speech wasn't enough by itself and there needs to be more conversations. If there is a real risk to our agencies in revealing the name, then we shouldn't. But perhaps he can keep talking to us about it.
We're going to keep this discussion going with a question from Mai Hamed.
Thank you. As a Palestinian Australian, we have watched our families be slaughtered, our communities decimated, and our people dehumanised. Our government has been complicit in Israel's genocide. And there have been 21 weeks worth of sustained protests and actions across this nation. Australians have come out, tens of thousands of them, time and again saying they do not want to be complicit in Israel's war crimes and genocide. Is it not about time that the government and the opposition party call for a permanent ceasefire and an end to the illegal occupation? And also, to add, hold them to account for their war crimes.
This is the problem. Decent people recoiled in horror at the attack on the 7th of October, and decent people want this conflict to end on all sides. But when we move this conversation to what has just occurred, which is questioning the entire existence of Israel, and that's what we're being asked here to talk about, then that's not a constructive path to peace. Right now there's a potential negotiation in Cairo, and anyone who wants to actually have this end in a negotiated outcome would want Hamas and Israel to come to that in good faith. A simple request was made of Hamas to provide particulars of the hostages who are still kept by a terrorist state, and they refused to provide those particulars of the hostages. If you want this war to end, and I do, those hostages have to come home. They have to come home.
Next we'll hear from Miranda Castles.
Thank you. My question is for the member for Menzies, Keith Wolahan. Can you please explain the Liberal Party's process for pre-selection in Dunkley? I'm wondering how it is that the Liberal Party can set a gender target at the last election and then pre-select a male candidate who already has a platform over 2 women.
So,
and there is, just to add to your question, don't usually do this, but there is some breaking news tonight that there has been someone selected to be the candidate in the seat of Cook, and that is a man as well. Simon Kennedy has won that pre-selection. He thumped it in, actually, 158 to 90 votes. Take it away.
I will acknowledge, when we sit in the chamber, we need more women on our side, particularly in the House of Representatives. The Senate is doing much better, but we have work to do in the House of Representatives. And I say that as one of the men sitting over there. We are a federated party, so each state has its own constitution. And we don't just believe in constitutionalism, we believe in democracy. So it is a very important value for the Liberal Party that every pre-selection is democratic. And I take great pride in our pre-selections being democratic. What we have to do is to feed through members and pre-selection candidates who will then succeed. And there's so many talented women in the party who are doing that, and they're putting their hands up now. If you're not a member of the Liberal Party and you care about that, please join. And can you tell other women to join? We want more people to join political parties.
OK, wait.
But join our one if you can.
Women ran in these pre-selections. They joined.
But democracy is also about numbers. It just is. It's about numbers. So we're a democratic party. That's a value we hold dearly. What I find again and again, I have...
They keep getting beaten.
Well, not always. So in Higgins,
these pre-selections?
We had a female challenge, a sitting member in a seat, Mary Aldred, who will be a fantastic addition to our parliament and our party. We've got Katie Allen in Higgins. We've got women leading the way in the pre-selection for Kooyong. Victoria's doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good. We're not perfect, and we have work to do. We're doing pretty good. In Warrandyte, which overlaps in my area of Menzies, Nicole Werner was pre-selected and won, and the person who came second was Antonetta de Cosmo, who was a young girl in her early 20s. The Liberal Party's ready to pre-select talented women, but we need to lift our game in making it happen more often.
Do you agree that after these last 2 elections, so, you know, just the by-election this weekend, Dunkley, and now Cook, both male candidates, that doesn't look like that?
It looks like we're falling short of the target. It really does. And so we have significant work to do. But we've got to do that in a way that is consistent with the value of democracy. Because unlike the Labor Party, where it's easy to make these decisions by factions deciding who runs where, it is easier to do it that way.
Well, what did you want to say, Kate?
There's plenty of factions in the Liberal Party. Don't sit here and pretend there aren't. But
we don't do pre-selections like that.
So how do you break through that? How do you encourage people to join the Liberal Party who don't look like what's already there?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you an example. We've got to lead by example. In my seat of Menzies, I have a young Liberal branch, and it is probably the most active in the division in terms of recruiting new people to the party. I've had many young men and young women who I've met who are interested in politics, and if I get a sense that they're on our side, I say, would you consider joining? They have a coffee with Dean, and it's just been flooded with young people. We need to do that across the whole state, but we also need to be a place that people and young women want to be a part of. And
do you get why they wouldn't want to so much?
Well, sometimes we don't help ourselves.
I'm being honest, if it's just a sea of men.
Let me give you an example. I thought that article against Zoe McKenzie the other day was disgraceful.
Tell people, I was going to ask you about that. So there was an article, please explain it.
So Zoe McKenzie is a good friend of mine, a female member for Flinders, an amazing member of Parliament, an advocate for her community. Some people, apparently, no names, took offence to her congratulating the new Labor member, Jodie, for Dunkley. That's an important thing to do in democracy. We're not at war with the Labor Party. They're not our enemies, they're our opponents. It's a contest of ideas, not of personalities. And the most important thing to do in a vote is the concession speech to acknowledge the legitimacy of the vote. And Zoe did that with class and grace, and she should be commended for it.
So why are your colleagues trying to tear her down? Because they were leaking that she'd done this horrendous thing by congratulating, your opponent, as you say, and that was on the front page of the Australian newspaper.
Well, they didn't have the courage to put their names to it, so Zoe had the courage to put her name to her congratulations of Jodie.
OK, I just want to go now to Pierre Lai.
Thanks, PK. Last week, we saw politicians Bob Katter and Andrew Wilkie dress up as giant pigs in a live commentary about the supermarket duopoly, gouging consumers in order to maximize profits. So my question is such a political stunt useful to public discourse, or is it just a distraction? What can politicians realistically do other than naming and shaming the companies we are already so familiar with?
And Keith, I've never seen you in a pig suit.
No, those photos are hidden. So,
your opponents are using them as bribes.
On a more serious note, I am a little bit concerned when that creeps into the parliament. This happened down where the press are.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to pick on the Greens political party. There are times when motions are put forward where they're deliberately designed to have a gotcha for who sits where. And people will tweet about, oh, why did you vote against, insert motion? And often the motions are drafted in a way knowing that we can't support one of the 5 parts of it, but it's done for the photograph. I think that's a stunt that's creeping in more and more in the parliament. And again, we saw when the president of the Philippines spoke, where we had a student-like protest in the parliament. And I think the Greens need to think very carefully about bringing that into the actual chamber or to the Senate.
That's all we have time for. Thank you to our panel, Sabine Wolf, Katie Gallagher, Keith Wallahan, Nathan Thrall and Jamal Rippey.